Hi, I'm Linda Simidian. Welcome to Shades of Us, a show that explores multicultural identities and how they intersect.
We're at Cafe Con Libros, a feminist bookstore and coffee shop in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, dedicated to fostering an inclusive space that empowers women and girls. Beyond offering books and coffee, it serves as a vibrant hub for conversation, activism, and connection. In this episode, we meet women who are redefining their communities by blending tradition with innovation. Their personal journeys reflect the strength and resilience of those making a meaningful impact. Stay tuned for these stories right after this. According to a 2023 scoping review by the National Institutes of Health on the effect of doulas on maternal and birth outcomes, doulas have been found to reduce cesarean section frequency, low birth weight, and premature labor.
We meet a pioneer in maternal wellness and self-care who is fostering a strong, supportive birthing community. She reveals how one idea blossomed into a transformative initiative, the pivotal moment that sparked her journey, and the influence she's having as a leader in the doula community.
We hear from people who go to medical conferences, they're like, this is so fun. We want to make it a celebration. And so it really is about bringing people together and bringing our doula community together, because we have so many people who are spread out throughout the country. It's kind of like our little Super Bowl. Hi, my name is Latham Thomas. I'm the founder of Mama Glow, which is a global maternal health and education platform. We're based in Brooklyn, New York. Mama Glow, I believe, was inspired by my own birth story of my son. He's 21 years old, and I delivered here in New York City in a birth center. I remember that 20 minutes after he was born, I was like, no one said it would be like this. Nobody ever told me that my ancestors would visit me in my birth. No one ever told me that in this experience I would feel my most vulnerable but my most powerful at the same time. No one ever said that you would hold hands with God. It's like a spiritual event. It's not just a medical or clinical process. I was already in nutrition and fitness and yoga, so I was already teaching people in this life stage. And then they were like, well, can you come to my labor? I was like, no, I'm not qualified for that, but I can help you up to that point. And then it was like, okay, let me just get the education, right? And get the tools that I need to support in this capacity. And so I did that. I became a doula. So a doula is a non-clinical care provider that offers everything from emotional support, physical support, education, advocacy tools, and then partner support. And it's like having a cheerleader. One of my clients calls it having a producer for your birth. I worked with Alicia Keys, I worked with Ashley Graham, Anne Hathaway, DJ Khaled, who actually live Snapchatted the whole birth, which was kind of crazy. So with the doula work, as a solopreneur, I founded Mama Glow out of this idea of birth being this abundant and life-altering experience, but also helping them to connect with their own traditions where they come from in terms of their lineage, to figure out what's the path forward and how we're going to create a birth village around you and create space for you to have the best experience of your life. So in 2018, we had some seminal reporting about Black maternal health. And it was Linda Villarosa did a piece for New York Times, and it was globally impactful here in the United States. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth or due to childbirth-related causes than white women. What that can look like in New York City is that statistic actually shoots up. So Black women in New York are 8 to 12 times more likely to die, and also experience things like medical racism and bias within the healthcare system that impacts their care outcomes. And people were like, oh my God, what can I do? And that's when all these doulas came and wanted to be part of our program as well. That helped to catapult us to grow a community of 3,000 doulas. The Doula Expo is our annual culture shifting festival. It is a celebration to educate folks and to have an opportunity to bring fresh perspective to a lot of these ideas that are, siloed, or conversations that are happening sometimes in maybe like a medical space or even a journalistic space, but not really in a space of convening. So Soft Space is been around for a year, and it's been this amazing evolution in our journey with Mama Glow, because the community grew so much during COVID that we would need a bigger home. I was like, we can't miss out. It's really central, it's easy to get to, and it's time. So when you come in, we have sort of like a retail and staging area, a kitchen apothecary where we make tonics and teas and stuff for people. We have a library where our literary ancestors and also contemporaries are there. Then we also have a sanctuary with windows, but also mirroring, and there's like 25-foot vaulted ceilings with skylights. A lot of the work that we do at the Mama Glow Foundation allows us to serve in ways that we can't with Mama Glow, which is, all the non-revenue generating activity, things that are like social justice and social impact. We serve all Medicaid populations, as well as people who've aged out of foster care, teens, as well as folks who've been impacted by intimate partner violence, and also migrants. All of these people will get a doula from us through the city of New York. If I could provide people with kind of like a toolkit of things that I find helpful that they might find too, I would say develop like a sister circle. It's almost like having a board of directors for business, but do it for yourself. Like people who are vested in you as an individual, who love you, who are not jealous of you, not competing with you, but just want to see you shine. Another thing, I think it is really important to take time away for reflection. And so self-reflection practices could be anything from gardening to cooking to drawing. My motto is really about designing a life you don't have to escape. I love being a mom so much, and so raising my son has imprinted my life in so many ways. I feel like everything about raising him has colored my perspective, has changed who I am as a person. I mean, he's reorganized every cell in my body just by existing. It's a parental relationship still, but it evolves a little bit where you're still the parental figure, but there's this veneer of friendship that emerges that is so nice, that I didn't know was waiting. I didn't know it would be like that. So I feel really grateful to have that, and that we've come close. Yeah, much closer.
Stop telling girls they can be anything they want when they grow up. I think it's a mistake. Not because they can't, but because it would have never occurred to them that they couldn't. Sarah Silverman, comedian.
Our next guest is a writer, comedian, and actress from Mexico who is gaining recognition for bringing Spanish-language comedy to New York audiences.
My coworkers were making fun of me because I didn't know who Aaron Carter was. Is he a U.S. president? I don't know. So I did what I always do when I don't know basic-ish. I pulled the immigrant card. I'm sorry I didn't get the joke. It's probably because of my background as an immigrant.
I'm Anapaula, Guajardo. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico, but I lived in Texas for a great part of my life, South Texas. The transition from moving from Mexico to Texas, I was very young. I moved when I was 8, so it wasn't that heavy. And also moving to South Texas, the border towns of Laredo and McAllen, it's very Mexican. There's a big Mexican culture. So it wasn't so much of a culture shock. I always wanted to be an actress. I always wanted to be on stage. There was this part of me that just really wanted to be there, but it was it didn't click because I was very shy. So when I get to college, when I get to university, I started as PR. And then I find out that they have a film school. And I was like, okay, no, I want to do that. I want to do film school. So I switched my major. I didn't tell my family. I just did it. And since then, it just kind of like through teachers and students and just like being surrounded by people that wanted the same thing or had the same dreams, I also like started doing theater.
Do you know how many mediocre men I met in college? I'll give you a hint. I went to film school. Yeah, a guy almost had an aneurysm when I told him I had never seen a Tarantino film. He was like, what do you mean you've never seen a Tarantino film? How could you even call yourself a filmmaker? Do you even know drama? I'm Mexican. Do I know drama? I grew up watching telenovelas that alters your brain chemistry to react to everything dramatically. Like I fart and I'm like,
the transition from doing theater and like film and acting to stand-up was just something very random. I moved to New York like post-pandemic, like 2021, and there wasn't really a lot going on, but I wanted to do something creative. I needed to do something, like express myself in some way. And I think it was just one of those things I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try it out. There was these workshops, because of course when you're in New York, there's either like improv, stand-up, you have to do something. So I joined a stand-up workshop because I thought that was gonna be a good thing. I practiced performance and I also practiced writing, which was like, oh, the theater side, the writer side from film, the screenwriter side. So I tried out just a workshop for fun to see. I wasn't going with any intention to do something or to be good at it, or I just wanted to try something for fun. And I did it and I hated it at first because it was just, I felt like it didn't click. Like I wasn't getting laughs, I wasn't really feeling comfortable, and I got really self-conscious about it because I thought like, who am I to come and do stand-up? I'm just like, it's not working. Like I thought maybe my points of view or the things I wanted to say wasn't clicking. And we had a showcase at the end of the workshop, and that's when it was just kind of like it clicked. I performed, everything just kind of like just came together in a way that felt so natural and so fun, and I had fun and the audience had fun. And then that's when I was like, ooh, okay, maybe there's something here. It felt so good, and it was so different from what I had felt in other like parts like of doing art, and I really liked it. And then since then I just kind of like kept going, and through like other people that I met, it just started kind of like happening for me. I was talking to this girl and she's like, yeah, I'm bi, but you probably couldn't tell because of my long nails. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm bi, but you probably couldn't tell because I've only ever dated men and I've been in a straight relationship for 6 years, and I really discovered that I really love women and I don't know what to do about it. But I keep my nails short. I started doing stand-up in English first, and then I started doing it in Spanish, and I think like the difference was that English felt a bit more structured, or at least I thought that there was a right way or a wrong way to do it, because I took classes, or because, I mean, the scene in New York is very well established. You kind of know like certain formats, or the audience expects certain things, and I think like there was a structure that I kind of followed with English. And when I started doing it in Spanish, there wasn't really, it was just kind of like, do what you want to do. There's not even like a lot of open mics to test material, to do things. You just kind of test things on the spot, or you try things. And Spanish doesn't really have that structure where it's like, oh, words, punchline. Oh, you have to have like a joke every 5 minutes, make the audience laugh every 15. Here you could take them on a story. You could kind of like just, it feels more open and a bit more free to talk, to express yourself.
También nos acompañó hoy el novio de mi mamá. Y yo soy súper fan de su relación, en verdad son muy lindos. Me acuerdo una vez que estábamos en un lugar público y mi mamá le estaba desmenuzando pollito y se lo estaba dando de comer en la boca. Y yo de que, o sea, pero la verdad creo que muy dentro de mí me sentí muy celosa porque yo también quiero un hombre con dinero. O sea, es más, yo por un hombre rico, yo le mastico el pollito y se lo doy de comer como pajarito. I
think another thing that I've really enjoyed with stand-up is that moment of connection with the audience. Aside from like the laugh, obviously you want to make them laugh, you want to feel that thing, but after a show, someone coming up to me and being like, oh, that thing that you went through, I also went through that, and oh, I feel so like seen because that was the same thing with me. And I think that has made me feel so comfortable with myself because I don't feel that different or like I'm crazy or like my experiences are very unique. It's a little humbling to also know that you're not the only one going through this thing. It's just like, it's very universal, and I think I've really enjoyed finding that connection with people, that it's like I feel seen, and I also making other people feel seen or represented through what I have to say feels really nice.
Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, U.S. Supreme Court Justice.
We'll be back after this break. Who were the first female Irish immigrants to come to America, and why were they called Bridgets? One New York Post columnist researched this and found some surprising answers that tapped into her own ancestry.
I'm very grateful for that short period of history upon which my existence hinges. My name is Rikki Schlott. I'm a reporter and columnist with the New York Post, and I'm also an author. I wrote the article Bridget's Irish Domestic Servants in New York for the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. My great-great-grandmother's name was Mary Slevin, and she immigrated from Northern Ireland in the 1800s, late 1800s, and she came alone when she was 17 years old through Ellis Island and worked as a domestic servant in both New York and Pennsylvania until she was 24 and married my great-great-grandfather, Patrick McMahon. So that's 5 or 6 years of her life that she was independent and making her own money and rolling up her sleeves and doing the hard work. And without that several years of her young woman life, I would not be here. I think that Irish domestic servants are pioneers of Irish America and also just pioneers in and of themselves because they are very unique among immigrants and immigrant women of the 19th and 20th centuries because they did come on their own, which is very unusual. If you were to go to Ellis Island at that period of time, virtually every woman would have been a wife, if not also a mother, and coming in a family unit. And these young women were coming by themselves. The average age was 21, so they were kind of doing their own thing, which is very unusual, and paving their own path, very independent, and rolling up their sleeves and doing the work. And also, they're now the ancestors of roughly 35 million Americans, and so they're really the forebears of a very large faction of America and changed the color of the country in a meaningful way. They frequently came here looking for husbands, but also looking for work. And of course, the famine back in Ireland was a big reason as well. And so when they came here, they'd often become domestic servants first because there was a very large boom at the same time in middle and upper class urban populations. So there was a large demand for domestic servants. Also, there was just like a big fashionability of having servants around at the time. And these women spoke English, so they were ideal candidates to be hired because they could communicate with their bosses, who typically were of English background. There was such a large influx of Irish people at this point in time, which pretty predictably causes kind of a flare-up of nativism and hostility towards that group. Not to mention that the job's just not that glamorous. The hours, they complained pretty frequently, were odd, and they'd be woken up in the middle of the night. It was a pretty monotonous job. They were often not allowed any visitors. The quarters were very small, but I think the biggest issue that they pretty continuously faced was that they were depicted as Bridgets, which is a very common name in Ireland, but also became a pejorative pretty quickly. And so they were depicted in cartoons, often in kind of like with simian features and like less than human, often very masculine, sometimes toothless, and they would be depicted in contrast with the women of the household, the American women of the household, who were quite slight and feminine, and so it was a very derogatory way of looking at them, and quite frequently they were just looked down upon as lesser than, and I think quite specifically singled out because they were women moving about in this world on their own in a way that very few others were. One thing that's interesting about Irish women is that they were vastly overrepresented in the labor reform movement. Mother Jones, who's kind of an iconic figure of the movement, was Irish herself. She called herself a hellraiser, and an attorney general at the time called her the most dangerous woman in the world. And this is because Irish women were trailblazers in being in the labor force in the first place, and so they were very active politically in demanding their rights and demanding respect as well. I think that as we celebrate Women's History Month, Irish women of this era are important to look back on because they were independent women that really stood out for that era of paving their own way when they came to America, and they actually did quite a great deal to ensure that the next generation were better off. While 60% of them worked in domestic service, which was not quite a glamorous job, and a lot of them were dissatisfied with their occupation, just 19% of their daughters did the same. They were very dedicated to class mobility and to making sure that their children were educated and assimilated. And they also, I think, deserve credit for being the foremothers of 35 million Americans and for being active in political movements long before that was a norm, and for rolling up their sleeves too before a lot of women were accustomed to doing so. And I think for being an average of 21 years old and coming across the Atlantic is something that's pretty remarkable to do alone as a woman in an era where they weren't even afforded complete rights. I mean, I can't really imagine doing that myself, and so I really admire that. I mean, I think being part of the labor reform movement and being represented and demanding their voices be heard so early on did actually push the women's movement forward too, and they were very vocal in the suffrage movement as well. I think that's kind of part of the American spirit, is to realize that for so many of us, there are all these little immigrant stories and histories and a bunch of coincidences that bring us to where we are. And for me, I've always just been very acutely aware of that. And I think especially having a young woman that I could kind of relate to with an immigrant story in my past was unusual and stuck out to me among the branches of my family tree. And so that inspired me to dig into her a little bit more and dig into my family history, and then ultimately write this article as well.
That's our show. If you want to know more about the guests we featured, check out our Instagram page at Shades of Us TV and online at tv.cuny.edu. You can now download the app and watch CUNY TV from wherever you are. I'm Linda Samidian. See you next time on Shades of Us.